you know, they asked us after last night, we got to talking, and somebody said, well, you got to get more into how things really happened. And because we started talking so much about what Unarius is about, which actually is, there's no, you can't take one away from the other. This was all, you know, some people would tell us, well, it was performance art. Well, kind of, but not really. I mean, we were doing what we felt was different past lives that were influencing us in the present. And then we all happened to do it in front of a camera. And it was an amazing and very difficult experience, but very, very freeing. But before we go any further, I have to say this because this is something that I remembered after seeing this for the 100th time in the last couple of days, it seems like. Dennis was the guy at the control board. And you remember there's the shot where he's, you know, it was Woody Allen-esque in this regard. When you see him, you know, doing his thing from behind him, and you're looking at the screen and the things going on the little television monitor, and you kind of see his shoulder like this. Well, what he was doing was his left hand, the camera was on, his left hand is doing the focusing while he's talking into the screen. And that was the kind of thing we did. You just did what you had to do. And so then, you know, he got that shot done. And so then he moves the camera around so it's aiming this way, and nobody was around because I remember coming back the next day and saying, how'd you get those? Well, I kind of focused on the chair, then I sat in the chair.
Yeah,
and then I turned it on.
I was the only one there, yeah. And part of it too.
You lost it somehow. Did you hit the button again?
No, it's
yeah.
Technology again.
I just want to mention too that in doing the opening, the on-camera introduction to that, I was in that cycle, so that was a real struggle just to be clear, you know, to tell the story, to set it up, because I was the blue guy also. I mean, it was that dichotomy, it was that working out. I knew it was moving things forward, but the struggle, the flow, the free flow of consciousness when you're inspired, that particular time, I can see more than anybody, I'm sure, but I could see, yeah, I was really trying to overcome something, and it was this past, of course.
But, you know, you got to give him a break, too. He's 25 years old, and, you know, somebody says, okay, you're going to go down and you're going to sit in front of the camera and just talk and tell the story, open up the story. I mean, really, it's kind of cool. You think about it, because none of us had done that. And it's like, okay, go.
It's really cool when you think of the intensity in your performances. I mean, clearly you were, you know, tapping into something deeper on an emotional level, which gives a very unique performance to the whole thing. I can, in some ways, I consider it as, it's performance art without you ever intending it to be that. That's the beauty, I think, of what you did. You know, you were creating these incredible films not as spectacle or entertainment, but as a genuine process. It's very process-oriented filmmaking, kind of like Alejandro Jodorowsky, who's very process-oriented as well, but most filmmakers aren't. And there's just a feel to your performances, you know.
Yeah, and the more I thought about this, because it's inherent to what it's all about in this healing process. And I don't know if anybody has studied, you know, a lot of times the Tibetan sand art, where they'll spend days putting this beautiful piece of sand art together, and then they blow it all away, showing that this whole thing, it's the process that counts and what you get out of that whole process, but that there's always change and it's never going to be the same again. So in a sense, while we were involved with all this stuff, the end result was very, you know, sometimes it turned out hokey, sometimes, you know, I hear people giggle, oh, look at them, haha. But it was an integral part of the whole thing. This is us going through this painful process of self-exploration. And then the end result and seeing the finished product was cathartic as well. You got a healing out of that. And yet, you know, it's gone. Yeah. It's time to move on.
And you were not only not acting, but you were not getting permits for any of your locations.
Absolutely not.
All of those exteriors.
Permits, we need no.
You guys just showed up.
Yeah,
you guys just showed up with those costumes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the scenes with Uriel as Delos was the city center of El Cajon.
Which we know they really loved.
Favorite spot for us to film, yeah.
Did you interact a lot with the locals in El Cajon? Like, what was their response to you guys showing up?
They were so embarrassed. They wished we weren't there.
But we've been there for 40 years, so you get used to it.
Actually, a question weirdly that hasn't come up this weekend. Could you just tell us the basics about getting this stuff on television? Your interaction with the public access stations? and the kind of response you got, because this stuff played all over the country. I mean, we're talking about Channel J in New York.
Yeah, you guys were really pioneers in public access as far as getting your message out to many people.
Well, San Diego, I mean, was one of the first. I give you a very brief history. Public access came about because the FCC said in 1972, when cable was just starting out, you have to provide access for the government, for education, and for the public. So there were 3 channels set up that way. And I worked for the Community Video Center, which is a nonprofit agency that had a contract with what became Cox Cable to manage the station. I was there, the first cable cast was in 1975, middle of 1975. The following year is when I became
access station manager.
Amongst other jobs, yeah, many hats there, but yeah, I taught.
I also swept.
You know, video was so new. Nobody had VHS cameras. That wasn't even invented yet. It was reel-to-reel, black and white, half-inch videotape.
And where did you go to film school? You went to film school?
I went to University of Michigan, and then I went to San Diego State. So I was a student at San Diego State when all this was happening, and I started teaching workshops, video workshops, to the public. You know, it was a social, political tool. People were using. You know, the idea of having television was just radical. So naturally, when I found Unarius, it's like one of the first things I said, hey, we have a TV station. We can make, you know, we can make shows. And Uriel instantly, I mean, we were down there at the first one, and I think I do have it somewhere. It's the old black and white tape of Uriel.
We've got it. We just don't know how to play it. There's nothing around to play it anymore.
But actually, it does exist in a VHS because it was part of a documentary on the early years of access that we did many years ago. So I've got to dig it up. But and then it wasn't very long after that where she said, "Well, let's get some cameras. We got to, you know, we got to do our own." And so that's where it began. That was about late 1976, 77 when we really started doing production.
And did you guys go right onto public access right away? Like, was it made especially to share with others on public access?
Yes, yeah. The intent was to get it out in the world, and then it evolved because there was another, what became Time Warner, it was Southwestern Cable, was like the north part of San Diego. So we naturally said, oh, well, let's, you know, go there.
Let's go there next.
And then I came up to Orange County and parts of LA, you know, and a couple of years after, it's like Johnny Appleseed, you know, it's like, hey, we got this great show.
And the funny, interestingly enough too, because we were doing these shows that, quote unquote shows, these psychodramas, and all of us were so involved and engaged in this whole process. And when we started taking our shows to other public access stations, they just lit up because, you know, we were the only ones that didn't have talking heads. Hi, I want to tell you about the Christian religion.
Right, you tell them.
Yeah. They just were like, wow, this is great. Can we get Flash Gordon? You know.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. And was it Uriel's idea to do that, or did you bring that idea because you came in as the manager of the station,
to get it out there?
To really get it out to, like, I mean, like, who had the idea to get it out to multiple stations?
I had, like, the information, and she had the inspiration. I mean, I knew about them. I was part of a, you know, there was a network of public access. There, you know, it was a big movement politically. There were a lot of people active in public access, you know, and so that was part of a network, you know, not linked in any other way except socially and, you know, in communication. But I knew they were there, so I, you know, sharing that information, say, well, we need to get out there.
I know you guys had a film lab. I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
I said I know you guys had a film lab you built just for the Arrival, which we'll be showing later tonight, and I super recommend to everybody if you have time.
You got to see it.
It's a whole different experience than the public access. There was one student who was supported, I think, by Uriel to work on that and nothing else for 4 years, and the in-camera effects are like
and in-camera effects. I mean, you know, there were the video guys and there were the film guys.
16 millimeter.
And he was a Kodak Award winner as a teenager. His name is David Osborne, and we didn't have a budget for, you know, optical. We couldn't, like, send to the lab and do composites. He ran every effect, and we of course borrowed liberally for some of these videos because we like to recycle, right? Even you know, we had great Starfield effects. He would run those, the same piece of film through the camera up to 40, 50 times using mat boxes.
And they're meticulous.
When you see it, you just will simply not believe that this is in camera. But I didn't want to go on an Arrival tangent. What I meant to ask was, did did Uriel and Unarius begin to invest in your own equipment? I mean, I see all that stuff out there.
That's what I wanted to share, because this is so, the only way to say it, this is so kick-ass that she did this. Because, I mean, we went to the local junior college in San Diego, and they had a video, department. And we were trying to get their cameras, and we were having issues borrowing them, and one of the students who was, could do it was kind of reluctant because he, didn't want to get involved in that way necessarily. So when she found that, we were having issues getting these video cameras, she literally spent probably $50,000, that's $1975, to put this whole video lab together. Decks, cameras, tripods, lights. It's like we come down one day and all of a sudden, Christmas arrived.
Yeah, it was Christmas, yeah.
And
none of you guys knew she had done this. They just started arriving.
Well, she talked about it and said, we're going to do this, and we're going, okay.
And I wanted to share this because this is, you asked who started this. The moment we started having people come to Unarius, filmmakers from all over, from Europe, from all over the U.S., all over the world, they would come because they would hear about this lady talking about life in other worlds. And in 1975, that was outrageous. Life on other worlds? Wow, and she's saying that there is. And so they'd come out to visit. And a couple of them were big-time filmmakers at the time, and after they came and they would see and they would talk and they'd say, hey, we're going to do this. Some of them did a little bit, some didn't do anything at all. That's when she came to the students before we had done really anything. And she just said to us, we go to classes, and we're sitting in class, and all of us are terribly inhibited, except for Dennis. And she just said, you guys are going to make films about Unarius, and you're going to talk about it, and you're going to tell how much it has helped you, because it's helped you, haven't you? And we're all going, yeah, but I got to talk about it? But her push was so strong.
Had the workshops up until that point been that performative? Like, were you just putting on?
No, sorry.
That's interesting, because it means like you're going from just sort of talking about this stuff to being like, you're going to put on makeup, you're going to make outfits.
We went from crawling to you're running now.
Right.
That's it.
And then for me, having come out of film, television school, there was another element that has to happen, which is, why are you doing what you're doing? What is your motivation? And in my case, subconsciously, it was the blue guy. It was like, I'm the media guy, I'm the expert, no, you're the student and you are gonna learn. It was a lot of deflations, until I got it. But I wanted to give example of, a really good example, and you saw the priest, Quantos. Arthur was a pastor, a Christian pastor, before he came to Unarius. And a lot of things that as he became a Unarian, he was still carrying like this heavy religious frequency, the worship of Uriel.
Beat my back, all that stuff. And she kept trying to help him. You're not supposed to do that.
Right, and so that's why that particular scene is as long as it is, because it was for him. For him to be able to say, okay, you're the Pope of Orion.
And interestingly, that was one of his pasts that he knew about, that he had been a pope, and I can't remember which one it was. But it was just one of these people you meet, and his religious attitude was so ingrained. And I'm not talking about spiritual, just this religious, heavy, dark attitude was so ingrained with him. And that was one of the things he came to want to and have to work out in this lifetime and resolve and discharge. And that's what Uriel gave him.
What happened to him? Did he stick around very long?
Oh yeah, he stuck around.
He just passed away this year. He was
probably 45, 50 in that video.
Right, he was
so
80 something.
Yeah, when he finally made his transition. Sweet guy.
And just over time, he shed that whole religiosity. And with Roberto, the technician, he had impacted wisdom teeth in this lifetime. But it was an indicator. It was like a condition that had its roots, no pun intended, had its roots in all these pasts and all this negative energy. And Roberto overcame much of that. And Roberto, when we see this movie coming up, The Arrival, Roberto built the synthesizer that he performed it on, and did all the soundtrack music for this. He was like a very gifted composer. but he also had these pasts that he had to overcome. All of us had to overcome these kinds of negative
And you
impacts.
watched each other do that. So that's
Yeah,
what's
and
so
we grew
interesting,
together doing
whether
that.
whatever anybody might believe or be able to, fit in their brain with ideas of reincarnation, the results were real.
And
Real.
there's another thing about, and I can't let this go because I think it's such an integral part of what we do as students of Unarius and how you get into this whole idea of enacting and performing and how supportive Uriel was. All of us, none of us had any money. I didn't have a real job. I was
You were
busting tables.
18 when you came.
Yeah, I was 18.
Yeah.
And Roberto didn't have any money, but he wanted to have a synthesizer to do the effects for the movie, and he went to Ruth Norman, Uriel, and he said, hey, I got this great idea. I need a synthesizer to do all, because he said, we couldn't find an orchestra to play what he had written. And he said, but if you give me the money, I'll make my synthesizer and do it myself. And I was standing there when she got the letter, and she says, oh, he's going to make the music on a synthesizer. That's really good. And he wants money. Okay.
Amazing. And we
Gave
should
him the money so
mention,
he could go buy it and
we
do
should
it.
mention you guys were not a commune,
No.
like some groups.
No.
You were meeting many times a week, though, so you probably
Yeah.
had families wondering what you were up to. Hey, back to the public access stuff. How many channels did you guys get out to? Do you remember, how many cities? Because
Where's
I don't
Celeste?
know.
We
What
got
was
up
that?
to
What'd you say?
Probably the highest number that we had at one time was around 30.
Yeah.
Wow, 30 different channels across the country, and Channel J was like a big channel, I know, because
Yeah.
I know people who lived in New York. I mean, there was a whole subculture of video film heads who pirated, who bootlegged and coveted your
Were you aware of
videos
the
for
bootleg?
years.
I didn't.
Well, yes and no. What would happen is, because I know where some of them came from, which is so silly the way they did it. They would come to events that we have, and we'd show the arrival, or we'd show a video that we have, and there'd be guys standing up at the back with their video cameras on the screen. And I'm thinking to myself, that's really dumb, because you could pay $5 and get the thing from us direct. And then you hear about it, and it's like, well, okay, if you want to do it that way.
Like there's something glorious in bootleg.
Exactly, so okay.
But now, we stream on, we have classes that are online. We, have YouTube
Videos
programs. It's
and
not like
all that stuff,
everything
so.
happened in 1980 and then stopped, and it's ongoing. So many of the students have passed on, but there are.
We're still making videos.
Still making videos.
I want to address something that we've been talking around a lot of bit, but I want to go right to it, which is, the film is directed by Dave Osborne. The show is not directed by anybody specifically, right? It's directed by all of you.
No, it's.
So what is that? I mean, let's really get into that for a minute. I've never heard of a show not having a director. And I think it's really interesting that you guys accomplish such ambitious stuff in this communal nature. Let's talk a little bit about that process.
Well,
Just to clarify, too, you're saying the video stuff
So the
doesn't have a
videos.
director, but
The
the film
video
that we're
has
about
yeah,
to
the
see.
film does,
Right.
and
Yeah,
it
it does.
definitely has more of a shot with it. But these are still pretty complicated. There's setups, there's sets. You have to know. There's
Well-
all kinds of agreements that have to be
Yeah.
come to.
Well,
Editing.
you're saying it like filmmakers say it. We didn't do it that way.
That's why
And this is when you would go through different cycles in Unarius, and Dennis spent many years being the head guy in the video department. But as you would learn and express and help in different ways, you would get to a point where you'd say, "Hey, Uriel, I wanna do this kind of a show," and she'd let you do it, whatever you wanted to do. But in that whole process, though, it was a collective, collaborative effort. And so, we would set up scenes, Dennis would set up scenes, we would come in as students to enact those scenes from what our remembrances of our past lives are. And yet he would say, well, you guys got to do this now, or whomever was, quote unquote, leading that particular scene. And if you didn't feel that, you'd say, and it happened plenty of times. I don't feel that. I don't see that.
Wow.
This is what I'm feeling with this. It's like, oh, okay.
Right, and so it's kind of a different kind of directing. There were, like when you saw the controlling scenes, we set up, you said the other night, it's like Salvation Army was our friend, because we'd find this piece and that piece.
It was right next door, actually.
Right
We'd go to
next door,
Salvation
yeah.
Army and buy everything we could off their shelves,
Right. And so in the working out, and part of the working out was enabling students to express their past. So that was a form of directing, which I would say, okay, tomorrow we're going to do blah, 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 and you'd set it up, and we tried to give them the experience where they wouldn't even know when those students came up into the control lab, they didn't really know what to expect. We kind of kept that a surprise so they could have the spontaneous experience, and whatever happened, happened. So it's like you direct in a certain way in that you would put things together for this to happen, but once it started happening, it was...
Its life was its own.
Yeah, and then you try to put it together as a story in the editing and the, writing that would be the context, put it in context.
Yeah. Do you want to open it up to the audience?
Yeah, sure.
Any questions?
Let's get a little over it. Wow, somebody shot right up.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, just hold on, because we're recording some of the audio.
Going back to the public access, y'all had 30 stations and all that. Did y'all gain a lot of members from, or a lot of interest because of showing this? Like, what was the? You talked about the interest of the people who had the access to the shows or were in charge, but what about the people, the viewers, the audience?
We always did get members from the shows that went out there, but because Unarius is such a person-centered science, as opposed to a religion that says, hey, come to my church and we'll tell you what it's all about. Unarius is very much a self-taught, it's self-responsibility as you study the text. So a lot of people we heard about years later who told us, oh, I watched your show for years, and we had no clue that they were watching or paying attention. And then there's things that happened that surprised me, and Dennis probably doesn't know this, but we would go to different cities and have gone to different cities for New Age events. And we were up in San Francisco Bay Area, 5 years ago? Something like that. And at one of the New Age events there, and we're at our booth, and all of a sudden in walks all these creative art film students from a school nearby, a creative arts school, or maybe it was University of San Francisco, I can't remember. And oh, we want to see everything you guys got. We've been watching all your videos in our classes for years. And we had no clue. But that's the type of stuff that we found that has happened over the years. Another example that I enjoyed particularly was that I lived in an apartment complex right near where the center was while we were doing so much of this work. And in this apartment complex, there was a very religious old man and old lady. They were probably in their 70s. And it's kind of like, okay, good for you. You found your path. That's wonderful. And we kind of wondered what they ever thought of us, because they'd always hailed Jesus as we went by. And one day, we ended up talking to them, and the show had been preempted by something else that was on the local public access station. And they said, hey, your show wasn't on today. I said, no, it was preempted. And they said, well, we never miss that show. It's the best thing on television. my head just spun. It's like, really?
Yeah. That's great.
Hi. I'm curious about UFOs. I wonder how that ties into that.
How that ties, well, we've talked about the spiritual brotherhood, those who have evolved past the need to be in a physical world, that it's an ongoing, continuing, expanding evolution. Then there are also those that are still maintaining physical bodies, but maybe are more advanced. And so part of Uriel's mission was to move that forward, move that understanding that there is life on other worlds, physical worlds. And in the 80s, there were a couple of shows. She got the nickname Spaceship Ruthie, and all these things. And I asked her one time, doesn't that bother you? She said, no, because if one person gets the inkling that there is life on other worlds, then that served a purpose. That's like a quickening for that soul, and that was what she was all about.
She claimed she was like an ambassador, wasn't she?
Yes,
so she was
yes.
interacting with other beings on
Yes.
other planes. She told you, right?
Absolutely. And so not only did she make mental communication with these other worlds and peoples and living on other worlds, and continually talked about the fact that we are not alone in the universe. But also, Ernest L. Norman, her husband, who she co-founded this whole Unarius mission with, talked about UFOs throughout the text and said, people thinking that we're the only world with life on it, and see a UFO for the first time. It's kind of like people that go to the zoo and see a giraffe for the first time and say, well, I don't believe there's any such animal. You know, the reality is that there's plenty of life throughout the cosmos, and that's where these UFOs are coming from, and they're trying to, in their way, help awaken this world to the fact that, you know, we can have it better, but it's kind of up to us. So.
Yeah. And any other questions or other questions out there?
Yeah, I have, if you could just clarify one thing about Roberto and his teeth. I wasn't clear on whether he was suffering as you were shooting, not through regression, but at the time, and did he receive a healing on camera? Was that what?
Yes.
Okay.
So his impacted wisdom, yeah, that is a good question. I was wondering that too. His impacted wisdom teeth.
Yeah, he was having issues with that, and he had been going to a dentist, and he had begun to get. I believe at that time he had gotten a quote-unquote reading on that particular issue and what was going on with him physically, why his teeth were so impacted, and they were growing sideways, something really bizarre. And he had gotten a reading on it, but he hadn't really had, quote-unquote, a healing on that or a releasement of that energy. And what you saw on film, on the video, was him getting that healing, and that was raw, real. That was what was going on right at that very moment. He was getting that psychic healing. Now, he still had to go through and get the physical healing to have the wisdom teeth taken care of.
Right, yeah, it's not like, you know, you never go to the doctor, all of a sudden everything's magically going to be fixed. What it is everything that you have experienced health-wise that's, you know, wrong are clues for you to start digging into the past and correct the original psychic reason for those maladies, those problems, that dis-ease. They're all indicators of something's wrong, something is out of sync, something is not positive and progressive. You still have to take care of yourself medically, you still have to eat well, you have to do all the things that you need to do to take care of your body, and if you have something broken, you get it fixed. But if you have that awareness that, oh, the reason is I, you know, had this egomaniac, blah, 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 whatever, you are correcting so you don't repeat those kinds of things, that you are canceling out those waveforms. And that's progressive evolution.
Yeah.
All right, this is going to have to be the last question, guys. But the good news is we have a great museum and after party for you out back.
I'm curious about what Unarius' life has been post Uriel's passing, and like how, if you honor her still, or how she figures into your activities presently.
Yes, absolutely. We have a board of directors now that takes care of everything on the day-to-day level for Unarius. We still have classes twice a week, actually 3 times a week. We have an art class on Sundays, and we have past life therapy classes on Wednesday and Sunday nights. And most importantly, even before she made her transition, and she was a cosmic generator. I mean, it was an amazing experience to be in Uriel's aura. And I wish he was here right now physically so you could experience, because until you do, it's trying to hand somebody a foreign object and you're going, what is this? It was just an amazing experience. That being said, before she made that transition, she came to all of us, her students, and she began the process of helping us in a much stronger way make that attunement to our higher self, and sit down in groups and practice this idea of receiving information from our inner self, especially from these beings on these higher spiritual worlds. The whole point being, and she said this before, you know, it's probably like a year before she made her transition.
Which was in
1993. She said, "It is so wonderful now, all you people are channels, you can all receive the inspiration from the inner worlds, and you do not need me here physically," and that's the way it should be. And so the whole purpose of Unarius and what they brought, Ernest Norman and Ruth Norman, is not for us to look to them and say, you're the only one that's going to save me, tell me what to do. It's the exact opposite. It was to teach us to find our way through these teachings that they brought.
Right, and a quick note, I mean, she told me around the mid-'80s, you need to go out in the world, you need to, like, do your thing, so to speak. And so I did that, you know, raising family, coming up to LA and working in Hollywood in, you know, small capacity, but it was like I needed to overcome, you know, some of the media ego that I had been expressing. And there's nothing more humbling than raising children. So that was part of the ongoing, watchword of humility, was she expressed to me many, many years ago. But to be open as a channel in whatever creative field you have, whether it's a writer or a musician, or you learn to tune into that. And it's not Uriel as a person, it's the universal force that Uriel represents. And she said, if I could leave you this one thing, she said, this is all your future. This is where you will go, is to become more and more integrated, to become a higher and higher consciousness, to help others who are younger souls moving forward by the way you express, your own creativity. And I think that's just like a wonderful universal message for us all, and it's something that we carry. That is Uriel that we carry.
Wow.
In our hearts.
That's incredible how much integrity she maintained to the very end, and how giving she was. Thank you both. Yeah.
Please give these guys a round of applause. And please do join us on the back patio with artifacts, original video catalogs, behind-the-scene photographs.